So we've just been unlucky then, in terms of reaching such thick ice a bit earlier on?
Well, it's certainly an element of bad luck, but to be perfectly honest, this is part of a longer-term trend across a large part of East Antarctica where sea ice has been actually paradoxically expanding over recent decades.
I mean, that sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because we hear about climate change and global warming melting Antarctica. The idea of sea ice increasing sounds quite counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because ultimately, how do you explain that conundrum? One of the great ideas we're out here actually testing at the moment is the idea that a large part of East Antarctic ice sheet is actually melting. And of course it's fresh water, and fresh water relative to seawater is less dense, so it floats to the surface, and it's got a higher freezing point. So the implication is that actually the greater sea ice extent is actually as a result of ice melt, fresh water floating to the surface and then freezing.
Is that a big trend throughout the whole of East Antarctica?
Yes, that's right. Actually, it's a broader trend across the whole of the East Antarctic. You see this expanding sea ice. And as a result, we can use our approach into Commonwealth Bay and all the scientific observations we're making as we go as a way of testing these hypotheses which are relevant to the broader region.
How big a concern is this idea that the East Antarctic might be melting?
Well, actually around 50 metres worth of equivalent global sea level rise is actually held in the East Antarctic. It's about 3 kilometres thick. So you don't need to melt much on the edges to raise global sea levels a lot. And that's ultimately a bigger issue here. But the sign of expanding sea ice is perhaps an indication that we're actually looking at greater sea level rise than predicted at the moment.